Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Hi everyone, I'm Brittany. Welcome to Randomness, where we talk about a little bit of everything, the deep, the weird, and the real. So take a breath, open your mind, and let's get into it. All right, guys, today we're talking about something that I think is one of the most common but least talked about problems in relationships, and that is when communication breaks down. And I'm not just talking about like the big blowout fights where nobody's listening. I'm talking about that quieter, more insidious thing that happens when you and your partner just stop really talking. You stop sharing, stop checking in, you stop being emotionally present with each other, because that kind of silence, that's actually way more dangerous than arguing. At least when you're arguing, you are still engaging. But when the conversation stops, that's when the distance really starts to set in. So let's talk about why this happens, what it looks like, and what you can do about it. So first, let's talk about why people stop communicating in relationships, because it rarely just happens out of nowhere. There's usually a reason, and understanding the reason is really important because it changes how you respond to it. Sometimes people shut down because they don't feel safe. And I don't mean like physically unsafe, I mean emotionally unsafe. If every time they try to express something, it turns into an argument, or they get criticized, or their feelings get minimized, eventually they're going to stop trying. They kind of learn that opening up leads to pain, so they close off as a form of self-protection. And this is really common with people who kind of grew up in households where emotions weren't talked about a lot, or where they weren't welcomed, or where conflict was scary. They kind of learned to go quiet as survival mechanism, and that pattern follows them into adult relationships. Sometimes people shut down because they're overwhelmed, like they're carrying so much internally, stress, anxiety, unprocessed emotions, that they literally don't have the bandwidth to communicate. They're not trying to shut you out. They're just drowning and don't know how to ask for help. Sometimes it's because they've given up a little, not necessarily on the relationship entirely, but on certain conversations. They've tried to bring something up before and it went nowhere, so they stopped bringing it up. That's called stonewalling. And it's actually one of relationship researcher John Gottman's 4 major predictors of relationship breakdown, alongside criticism, contempt, and defensiveness. And sometimes, honestly, people just get lazy or complacent. Early in relationships, we're intentional. We ask questions, we share things, we really make time to connect. But as time goes on, life gets really busy, routines take over, and communication is one of the first things that gets deprioritized. Not out of malice, just out of comfort and habit. And then there's the couple dynamic version of this, where it's not one person shutting down, but both of you slowly drifting into parallel lives. You're in the same house, you're going through the motions, you talk about logistics, the bills, the kids, what's for dinner, but you're not actually connecting. You are more like roommates than partners. And that can happen so gradually that you don't even notice until one day you realize you can't remember the last time you had a real conversation. So, what does communication breakdown actually look like in practice? Because I think it's important to recognize the signs before it gets too far. And one of the first signs is that conversations stay surface level. You are talking, but you're not saying anything real. You're not sharing your actual feelings, what you're actually thinking, what's actually going on with you. Another sign is that you stop asking each other questions. Early in relationships, we're so curious about each other, but when communication breaks down, that curiosity fades. You stop wondering about your partner's inner world because you've stopped caring or you've assumed you already know everything about them. And there's also the avoidance pattern where certain topics kind of become off limits. You both know there is something that needs to be talked about, but neither of you brings it up because you're either scared of the conflict or you've tried before and it went badly. So the elephant in the room, it just kind of stays there, keeps growing. And then there's the physical withdrawal that often accompanies emotional withdrawal. Less eye contact, less touch, less of those small moments of connection that make a relationship feel warm. And if any of those feel familiar, it doesn't mean your relationship is over, but it does mean something needs to shift. So, what do you actually do about it? The first thing is to get honest with yourself about what's happening, not in a catastrophizing way, but in a clear-eyed, compassionate way. Acknowledge that there is a disconnect because you can't address something you're pretending isn't there. Second, think about which pattern you're in. Is your partner the one who is shut down? Are you the one who's pulled back, or is it both of you? Because the approach looks a little different depending on the situation. If your partner has shut down, the worst thing you can do is pressure them to talk. And I know that's frustrating, especially if you're someone who processes by talking and you just want to work through it. But pushing someone who's shut down usually just makes them shut down harder. Instead, create safety, create an environment where they feel like opening up isn't going to result in an argument or judgment. And that might mean changing the way you respond when they share something. If every time they open up and you get defensive or emotional, they're going to stop opening up. And you can also try approaching it gently and without pressure, something like, I've noticed we haven't been connecting much lately and I miss you. I'm not trying to start anything. I just want to feel close again. Because that's very different from you never talk to me anymore. One invites, the other accuses. And sometimes timing matters a lot. Don't try to have big conversations when someone just walked in the front door from work or when they're stressed or right before bed. Ask when would be a good time to talk. It sounds overly formal, but it actually works because it gives the other person a sense of control over the conversation instead of feeling ambushed. And if you're the one who's shut down, I want to gently challenge you to examine why. What are you protecting yourself from? Is it a fear of conflict, a fear of vulnerability, a belief that your feelings don't matter or won't be received well? Because silence might feel safer in the short term, but long term, it creates distance and resentment and leaves your partner feeling shut out. And it also means your needs never get met because no one can read your mind. Even if you don't have the words yet, you can say that. Just be like, I'm not ready to talk about this right now, but I promise I will. That's so much better than just going quiet because at least your partner knows you haven't completely checked out. if you are both in the drift, that roommate dynamic where you've just kind of stopped connecting, the fix is actually about intentionality. You have to decide to prioritize connection again and then actually do it. And that might look like putting your phones away during dinner and actually talking, asking each other questions you've never asked before. And there are actually like card games and apps specifically designed for this. Like We Are Not Really Strangers, which is really good. Taking a walk together without an agenda. Try something new together that gives you something to talk about. And it doesn't have to be a big grand gesture. Small, consistent moments of connection are actually more powerful than occasional big ones. But here's the hard truth. Sometimes communication breaks down because there are things that need to be said that nobody wants to say. Real things, hard things, resentments that have built up, needs that aren't being met, feelings that have been swallowed for too long. And in those cases, the only real solution is to have the hard conversation, which is scary, but it is so much less scary than the alternative, which is continuing to drift until the relationship quietly falls apart. And if you have tried to improve communication and things aren't getting better, couples therapy is genuinely worth considering. And I know some people feel like therapy means the relationship is failing, but actually, going to therapy means you care enough about the relationship to get help. So it's a sign of strength, not weakness. But here's what I really want you to take away from today. Communication isn't just about talking. It's about feeling connected, feeling safe, feeling like your partner is actually with you, even when you're not saying anything. And when that breaks down, everything else in the relationship starts to feel harder. So if you're in this right now, whether your partner has gone quiet or you have both drifted, or there are things that have gone unsaid for way too long, don't just wait for it to get better on its own, because it usually doesn't. It usually just gets quieter and more distant until one or both of you checks out completely. Choose the conversation, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you don't know exactly what to say, because showing up and trying is always better than the alternative. Your relationship is worth the awkward conversation, and so are you. And that's that, guys. But thank you for listening, and until next time, speak up, stay open, and remember, silence might feel safe, but connection is where love actually lives. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow, and remember, keep your energy grounded, your mind open, and your curiosity alive.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.